Hey, we're live. Welcome, Adam Kreek, to Crossy's Corner.
Oh, it's great to be here. The voice of rowing. I'm now talking to him. That's, what a experience. It's nice to meet you, Martin.
That's very kind of you, Adam. I've seen you row lots. I saw you row in, well, I think every World Championship you've rowed in, and in 2 Olympic Games as well.
Mm-hmm.
I guess some of the people watching might not necessarily know everything about you. You seem like an amazing guy, really centered, really grounded, family man, 3 kids, wife, and then around that, you've got this amazing career as one of North America's top management consultants and executive coach. And some of the old guys that I row with have been very interested in that that job, and author as well. 1 book so far. I guess there's more on the slipway.
There's more being I'll use this as an opportunity to peddle my book. Here it is, Responsibility Ethic. So for people interested in leadership, personal development, there's 12 ethics, 12 chapters in the book. Each chapter starts with a story and then moves into different principles, or whether it be a leadership principle or a personal development principle, along the lines of success, failure, how to be a better coach, better team member, lead better teams, be more resilient, recover more effectively, enact something I call providence. Hard work plus faith results equals results. So I'm pretty proud of the book. It achieved what I wanted it to achieve, but it took a while for me to pull it out of my brain and put it on paper.
You said 10 years it took you.
Yeah, 10 years. Well, because I wrote the first copy of my book and I thought, this would be interesting to me and maybe a dozen other people. And they say when you're writing an autobiography, the first copy you write for yourself, and you have to deal with a lot of your own bullshit and clarify your thinking. And then I rewrote it with in mind for my target audience, which is leaders who lead at least 100 people, maybe 500, 1,000, 10,000 people. Those kinds of leaders in organizations who you're a leader of team, you're a leader of department, or maybe you're a leader of a medium-sized corporation, so that you can not only gain inspiration from the stories that I share, but there's actual tangible takeaways that you can pull out of it. So I've put it down, rewrote it a couple times, brought in a great editor from California, Peter Economy, and then we rewrote each chapter probably another 8 times. And here we go. We're publishing the audiobook in the new year. I just sent it off to Audible, and I think that will reach a lot more people because it's easier to listen to a book than read it these days.
Yeah. Are you reading the Audible one?
Yes, I am. Yeah. So you get my voice and energy. So that's I think that's a positive thing. I hope it is.
Was there ever any doubt about your first, I think it's the 2nd chapter, but you kind of introduce it, but that first chapter where you talk about your boat overturning on the Atlantic, was there ever any doubt that you would start with that?
Well, there was originally the first chapter. Originally the first chapter was about the first World Championships I won, because it was that paradox of victory whereby you can anticipate feeling upset and depressed and empty if you do not achieve your athletic goals, but to feel the same way when you actually have achieved your athletic goals is a bit of is a bit surprising. And so we won the Seville World Championship. It was the first time a Canadian men's 8 had ever won a world championship. So we'd set history and we won. And the end was very unsatisfying for me, and it was depressing, and it was it caused a bit of soul searching for me to figure out what my values were and what I truly valued out of the experience, and to not get distracted with some of these what I call toxic goals in the book. So I initially talked about that and thought that as being the first chapter.
Yeah.
And I thought about, well, maybe winning the Olympics would be a good one, because that's a great story. I'm very proud of that sports writing too in that chapter. But at the end of it, I went through a series of pre-readers, and the comment was, well, I didn't really get into it until you told the story of your capsizing the Bermuda Triangle, and then I was hooked. And so, wow, okay, start with the most exciting part, bring people in, and then hopefully you catch the momentum, and you take the ride of the book, and you get the learning, and you get entertained, and you get inspired. So that's how it turned out. But it was quite an experience capsizing the Bermuda Triangle. Glad we survived it. I was just texting my crew yesterday. We were still good friends. One of my friends is he's circumnavigating the globe under human power without using a motor, and I think he's in India right now. I'm not sure. I'm looking to go down to South Africa, and just picked up a sailboat. So.
Do you ever get tired of telling that story? I mean, it's compelling. It just leaps at you off the page.
Yes, not really. You want me to tell it right now?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me set the stage, because we'll probably have a lot of rowers listening to this. I'm an international rower rowing for Canada. We had won the Olympics, and after that, I felt I was done with my international competition. I didn't have that fire. You want to go to hell and push your body to that limit. And the fire was gone. The competitive fire was gone. So I was looking for other ways to stay involved in the sport. I still love the motion. I love the idea of it. I got involved in this beer league style of rowing here on the west coast of North America, where you'd have people show up in all different shapes and sizes of rowboats. I'm trying to remember the name of, the Puget Sound Rowers or something like that, where someone would show up in a fat dory boat, someone would have a Moss single, someone would else have a kayak and an outrigger canoe, and everyone would just show up in all different. And if you pick the right boat class, no one else is in that boat class, and you win. So that was part of the game too. And it was really more about the barbecue and the beer afterwards, and you go rowing for a couple hours, and it was just a great weekend. So beer league rowing, as we call it here in the Northwest. And I was down at one of these races in San Francisco when I met a guy by the name of Jordan Hansen. And Jordan Hansen had rowed across the ocean once before. He was part of the old Atlantic Challenge, and they rowed from New York to England. That was the route that they were taking, and across the North Atlantic. And his crew had an interesting story. They were young guys right out of college. And the guy who was in charge of the food didn't plan properly. So they didn't have enough food. And so these guys, like college guys, fit, skinny, they lost 20 to 40 pounds per guy by the time they got onto the other side because of the poor planning. So he was starting to share this story. I remember when I was a competitive rower, I'd heard of people who had rowed across the ocean or done this ocean adventure stuff, and I thought, that is crazy. Like, why would I ever want to do that? What? It seemed like nothing I would ever want to do. And then after meeting Jordan, after talking about it, after thinking about it, and the way he described it, and this is how I would describe it too, it's an extended camping trip with your buddies. That's essentially what it is. You're out there, you're on this boat, you're fishing, you have your food, you're hanging out, you're doing all that magical stuff that happens when you have an extended adventure. You peel off the layers of the onion, you connect with your authentic self, you connect deeply with those that you're adventuring with, especially if you have people who are values aligned with you. And you connect with the universe and the great spirit and everything that's magical about humanity. You get the humility that comes from being in the wild and recognize that I'm just stardust. I'm just like a flash in the pan. I'm here, I'm gone. we were out in the middle of the ocean, and we were closer to the astronauts in the space station than we were to anyone on land.
Wow,
That's
yeah,
a great way to think about it. So I met Jordan, and he convinced me that I like I'm Canadian, I'm an outdoorsman. Part of the reason why I loved rowing was because it was an outdoor sport. I love the wild. I've done a lot of resource exploration in my time, worked on oil rigs, done some geological exploration too. And I like this idea of the great wild and the great unknown. The ocean terrified me, though. It still does. And maybe more so after my experiences. But so after having this conversation with Jordan and really wrapping my head around, the wilderness experience, the team experience, the adventure part, the fire was alight. And I said, Jordan, you know what? This is something I'd really like to do. If you're planning to do this again, let me know. And so Jordan gives me a call up maybe 2-3 months after. And he says, hey, Kreek, you know how you said you wanted to go across on the ocean? I think I'm going to start up a campaign again. But I need you to come along. I need someone else. I need your energy. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do it. He says, oh, come on. I was like, well, first off, I want to understand the safety. And so we started talking through the safety and how to make sure that we could get to the other side safely without being injured and hurt and harmed. And we went through it, and he planted the seed, and we ended the phone call with me saying maybe. And I said, oh, maybe I think I might do it, but I really need to think about it. And then it was 2 nights later, and I was there with my wife. We didn't have any kids yet. So I was at this couple's dinner party, which I'm sure you've been at one of these couples parties in your time. So all the couples are sitting around the table, the husbands and the wives, or the men and the women. They're having the conversation that's being passed around. And it comes to me, and they say, oh, Adam, I'm like, what's new with you? And I'm sitting there, and I'm trying to think, what is new? And it comes out of my mouth. I think, oh, I think I'm going to row across the ocean. And my wife looks at me. She's like, what? What are you going to do? Well, you remember Jordan I met down in San Francisco? And called me up and says, yeah, well, you said you talked to him. You didn't say that you committed to anything. Well, I'm seriously considering it now. And obviously, we had to work through that with her and I. She had to be convinced that it would be a safe endeavor.
Yeah.
And we did. So we committed to doing that. And over the process, it took us 4 years. We decided that we were going to be self-supported. 4 years of planning. 4 years of planning. We decided we were going to be self-supported. We're not wealthy. We didn't have the money to self-fund it. So we had to figure out, how do we create a venture? I had to put together $500,000 to to this expedition across the ocean. So a lot of that time, the first 2 years, was simply selling it and figuring out how to put together a package to fund this. And we ended up having an education and science package where we were able to get some funding from non-governmental organizations. Then we got corporate partners on board, and then we had one heck of a lot of supply partners. So people who gave us, food and gear and equipment and docking space, and helped us out with shipping. And so great sponsors like Panasonic. We had a gold mining company called I Am Gold. Coca-Tap was another good sponsor. Lifestyle Markets, which was a great grocery store, gave us a ton of food. Backpackers Pantry was another one. The Canadian Wildlife Federation was our big title sponsor with our science and education piece. So we put that together, and then over the process of the time, there was a child that came. My first child was born. Right? And then, as when you're planning an expedition, it's pretty, it's a lot of time in front of the computer, essentially. Yeah, putting it together. And then first child came along, and then my wife started getting that itch. She said, well, I have one child. I need more children. More babies. And I said, you realize that we've been planning this expedition across the ocean, and we're launching. And she says, you know what, if you can row across the ocean, I can grow a baby. So, okay, let's do it. So I couldn't help myself, really. So, she got pregnant at the right time. So she was pregnant while we were launching to go across the ocean.
Wow.
And so one of the things that she got me to do, she said, you know what, I trust you, and I know that you want to die even less than I don't want you to die. But still, just in case, I want you to write a letter to our son. I want you to write a letter to, he was 2.5 at this time, and just say, just in case you die, what you want him to know. And that was, I ended up putting that off. And ironically, two of the guys on my crew, Jordan, his dad had died when he was 2 or 3 years old, and Marcus, both his parents were dead as well. And so there seems to be this like free spirit that seems to be engendered in people who lose their parents at young ages. And so I sat down with Jordan, and Jordan especially, like, you lost your dad when you were young. His mother got remarried, he had another father he calls dad, but it's like, what would you want to know about your birth dad? He says, you know what, I remember all of the great stories. My father's remembered as the champion and the hero, and the things that made us laugh, and but I kind of want to know his darker side, really. I'd like to know what was, I'd like to talk to him about God, about politics, about religion, about sex, about these things that are kind of taboo.
Yeah.
But no one would ever talk to me about it because it's not conversational. Like, these are the things I wish I knew about my father. And so that's what I did. I ended up framing it in the 7 deadly sins in my relationship to greed, envy, lust, murder, whatever the other 3 are. But I framed that letter to my son, and I said, if I don't survive, these are my thoughts on all of these, and these are my personal experiences, and you'll hear all of the my glories, my glorious stories.
How was it writing?
Pardon?
How did you feel writing that letter?
Vulnerable. I'd say that would be one. Connected might be another descriptor. It was a challenge to write it, but it was also, there's an interesting motivation that came from writing that letter, especially from a safety standpoint, because it sunk in the gravity of what I was doing and the real risks that I was going to face when I was out there on the ocean. And I think even from my wife's perspective and wanting me to get to the other side, like the chicken across the road, get to the other side, it did engender a stronger sense of safety, which is one thing I wasn't expecting. I wasn't expecting that. I was thinking, oh, this is a legacy piece, and but from it was a very grounding experience. And I wrote it 2 days before we launched. I still remember we were at some resort in Dakar, Senegal, and I'm sitting down there writing it and uploading it, making sure that it was safe. I haven't read it for a number of years. I might even look it up after this call and figure out what I wrote down. Be interesting to see. But all this being said, we go and we push off, and the launch is interesting because after imagining what it's going to be like, we'd done a test run where we circumnavigated Vancouver Island in the Pacific Northwest. That took us about 30 days to do. So that was no small feat on its own. But this was, still, when you're circumnavigating an island, you're still, half a day away from land. Here, when you get out of the middle of the ocean, you're pretty alone.
Yeah.
There's that feeling of, as you watch all the land disappear. You could watch the land for probably 2 days as you rode away from it. It just got smaller and smaller and smaller, and then finally it was gone. Didn't see land, until we got to the other side. Then about 10 days into it, Well, we got hit. You get hit by seasickness. We had a funny sleep-wake schedule, so we had it was a combination of 2-hour, 1-hour, and 4-hour shifts around a 24-hour clock.
Okay.
And so what we call it is a modified Swedish watch. Traditionally, people have done 2-hour on, 2-hour off shifts, but we partnered with a sleep science research group out of Calgary, and I talked to a number of different ocean rowers. And we found that having one 4-hour sleep segment in a 24-hour period made a world of difference. You're actually able to go through 2 REM cycles and get deep regeneration. And so we chose that, and it worked. After about 14 days, we felt adapted to that sleep-wake cycle. The issue was that you're rowing 12 hours a day on top of like cooking, we had scientific responsibilities, communication responsibilities too. We had 30,000 school kids in America and Canada and West Africa who were following the row. And so we had a bunch of these responsibilities. And so we were starting to adapt. We had some seasickness, got over that. And then day 12 was when we got hit by our first, we were hit by small storms, but our first really big storm. And it picked up our boat. And it was about the size of a 3-story house. And it picks us up and it throws us down. We get to the trough, our oar breaks. And that was really uncomfortable. It was scary. You came close to death. And again, getting back to this idea of, writing a letter to your son and saying, if I die, this is what you should take from it. And none of us wanted to do that. So we ended up throwing out something called a sea anchor, which is an underwater parachute that aligns you with the weather. You're able to bob up and down. And we took out the broken oar, we replaced it with one of our spare oars. We had 2 spare oars on board. And then it was after that time, we designed the 3 rules of ocean rowing, and we wrote them on the roof of our sleeping cabin. And the first rule was don't die. Second rule is don't kill your mates. And third rule is don't sink the boat. So we went through. We had an incredible experience, right? It was connective. After about day 25 to 30, you fully adjusted to the environment. Your brain has cognitively adjusted to it. It's uncomfortable, but it's normal. What surprised me the most was how benign a lot of it was. There's just a lot of time it was actually, you weren't getting bashed around. You're sitting there. The waves were, I wouldn't say you'd take a racing skull out of them, but they were just calm rollers. It was comfortable water. And when you had, like, when the sun was out, the breeze was light, maybe 15 degrees Celsius. The ocean was maybe 18 to 20 degrees Celsius. It was beautiful. It was really enjoyable and kind of a little boring. And and you get into this rhythm where it's like, what are we gonna do today? And this joke with Pat was my team. What are we gonna do today? Well, we'll get up, do a little bit of rowing, eat some food, have a nap, do a little science, and then do a little bit more rowing. And there was, one of the gifts was the meditative experience that you'd have. You'd sit there and stare at the waves, and you'd lose your thought, and you'd resurface these old, just from a self-actualization standpoint, you'd have these memories that for some reason were buried deep in your brain, and for some reason an axon and a neuron decide that it's going to reconnect and say, hey, remember when you were 8 years old and your mom made you eggs and toast? Well, I'm just going to bring you back to that moment. And so then you're reliving these interesting experiences from childhood or your teen years, especially, because that's where a lot of memories are formed and then somehow blocked out. And they're reprocessing them in a way that where you can put more experience and intelligence behind them. So those were a lot of things that happened. We saw a lot of natural phenomena. We had moonbows. So in the middle of the night, it was raining, and the moon reflected on the rain. It would cast a beautiful moonbow against the stars, which was beautiful. And flying fish, we had flying squid, whales, seabirds would come land on us. We had these tiny little pilot whales who got in swimming with the pilot whales, turtles. It's just, the wildlife experience was very special.
Yeah.
And then we were heading to Miami, 73 days into it. So this is a long time if you think about it, 2.5 months, 2.5 months in a very small space, 2 meters by 3 meters on the deck, and then 1.5 meters by 2 meters in the cabin. And it was daybreak. We were going through a crew change. I had climbed into the cabin. Pat was coming, brushing his teeth. Marcus was sitting on the shitter, taking a dump in a little bucket, and Jordan was rowing, steering the boat, and then just a funky wave came. Wind was going one way, current was going the other ways, creating these four-sided waves that were peaked, and so it kind of picked up the stern of the boat and Jimmy jacked it, and when it did, it hit the wall of water, which wrapped around the side, flooded into the cabin. And as it started to flood in, I look up, I see Pat, I push him out. Go, Pat, go! Get out of here, and then you're trapped. You're trapped in this little tiny cabin. Like I said, 1.5 meters by 2 meters by 1 meter. It's a small little cabin. Water's in. You're trapped. So I'm bushing around, and I push my hand up, and I feel the floating cushion, and I realize there's an air pocket. So I pop my head up, and I have this just extreme moment of presence. And the only reference point I could have to that at the moment was this, like, sitting on the start line, international racing, where there's just nothing else matters except right now. I am nowhere except right here. And so some of that training came in. It's, okay, slow down to speed up, essentially. So take your time, take another breath, jump in, open your eyes. You see a blue light, swim towards the blue light, and everything's hanging upside down. You see the oars, it's the lines, and some of the sundry from the deck is floating in the water. It's a bit surreal. And then I pushed out, and I looked around. Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? Yes, everybody's okay. Is this an emergency? Do we press the beacon? And we look around. Jordan, yes. Me, yes. Marcus, yes. Look at Pat. He's like, I've already pressed it. So the rest of them, okay. So the rest of us press our own beacons. We had 4 beacons, one for each of us, and one attached to our emergency life raft. So we inflated everything. We went through it. We'd done all the prep beforehand, the safety prep, which was actually quite helpful. Yeah. Then, what was it, about 6 hours after we capsized, 5 to 6 hours after capsized, search plane showed up, and then we got in contact with them, and they diverted a couple ships. The first ship was the Tanais Leader, and it was heading to St. Petersburg, Russia. So you're like, okay, well, we're running halfway across the ocean. Just go to freaking St. Petersburg, but we're not going to complain. And then they found a second ship, the MV Hygiene, and they came, and they were going to Puerto Rico. So that would have been easier. Oh, that was easier because half our crew was American, versus trying to process everything in Russia because we lost our passports and everything. So so they pick us up and brought us to San Juan, Puerto Rico, and and here we are.
That
7 years later.